Because I run a job board, I talk to applicants almost every day. And many of the people I meet make the same mistake. They have no clear job search goals. So they apply everywhere, every day, all day long. You might think it's smart to send lots of applications. After all, it's a numbers game, right? It's not. The more you narrow your search, the easier everything gets, and the happier you'll be in your next job. Stop chasing every lead. Instead, focus on what you really want. Now, figuring out your goals can be hard, but we have a MaxList resource that can help. Finding focus in your job search. Go to maxlist.org/focus. Our free step-by-step MaxList guide will help you create your own job search goals. Get your copy today. Visit maxlist.org/focus. Again, that's maxlist.org/focus. This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm your host, Mac Pritchard. I'm also the founder of MaxList. It's a job board in the Pacific Northwest that helps you find a fulfilling career. Every Wednesday, I talk to a different expert about the tools you need to get the work you want. You will not only change jobs in your career, you may change where you live too. And doing a job search while relocating has its own challenges. Kimi Schiefer is here to talk about how to look for work while moving to a new place. She's a human resources generalist at the Bonneville Environmental Foundation. Previously, Kimi worked as a recruiter for an online publisher, a large retailer, and a national staffing agency. She joins us from Portland, Oregon. Well, let's get going, Kimi. What are the biggest challenges you see job seekers face when looking for work in a new city?
Getting in the door can be challenging because, of course, you want to include your location on your resume. But if you're living in a different city, a recruiter is going to look at that. And if you don't note that you are relocating, you might not even be considered. So something I recommend is putting your location, but at least in parentheses underneath, putting relocating to, city X, Y, or Z, and making sure that it's very clear that you are relocating.
And why is that, Kimi? Why does a recruiter like you, when looking at dozens, maybe even several hundred resumes, see an out-of-state address and not even consider that candidate for a position?
Sometimes we could assume that they're looking for relocation assistance, whether that's monetary or something else. So that's not always a resource that companies offer. So I could look at an out-of-state or out-of-town candidate and think, oh, they might want help paying for their relocation. And they might, get to the city that I'm in and they might decide, oh, it's not even about the job. I just don't like this city.
Are there other concerns besides relocation assistance or worry that somebody who's new to a city might not like the new place that employers have when reviewing applications from people who are outside the state?
Right. There's a worry that the candidate maybe hasn't looked at the job properly or the company in order to see where they're located. So there's this sense of like, oh, well, did they even realize that we're in Portland or Denver or wherever it may be? And we need to remember at the end of the day that the recruiter is a human being. Whoever is looking at the resume is a person. And even though we say, business is business, a lot of recruiters don't want it on their conscience if someone comes out to a city specifically for a job and then it doesn't end up working out for whatever reason, then that candidate is stuck in a new city without resources. And that's just not something that we want to weigh heavily on our minds. We want to make sure that, you're coming to the city, you're dedicated to that, not only to the job, but to your own relocation. And so making it clear that you're not relocating just for the job is really important.
You mentioned the importance of indicating on your resume that you're relocating to a specific city where the employer operates. What if you're a candidate who's considering moving to multiple cities? How should you communicate with recruiters what you plan to do?
Right. So that is something that I would not disclose to a potential employer because intentionality is very important for the reasons that I mentioned. And if you are looking at multiple different locations, I would adjust your resume to reflect the specific position that you're looking for, much in the same way that you would adjust your resume based on the position in terms of what you emphasize on your resume. You really want to make it clear, hey, I'm moving to your city. It would be great if I could have this job, but I am moving regardless. So even if you're looking at Denver and Miami and Portland, you want to present yourself as someone who is moving to the city in question.
Let's talk about best practices to follow that you see candidates use when relocating to a new city. Uh, One of the things that you encourage, and you already touched on this, is for people to be intentional when looking for work. Say more about intentionality, Kimmy, what you mean by that, and how can you apply that to your application materials and in your interviews?
Yes, I see a lot of job seekers say something along the lines of like, "Oh, I'm open to anything. I like these certain things, but I'm open to whatever." And really that doesn't present yourself in the best way. It's better to say, "I am looking for an administrative position," with an example of, "Oh, I want to be an administrative assistant," or "I want to be a payroll specialist." It's really about showing that you're thinking about this whole process and not just taking the first job that will hire you. It's better to be specific and, yeah, intentional. You really got to make sure that the recruiter and the hiring manager know that it's this specific job that is interesting you. Even if you're looking at 50 different jobs, you want to present yourself as though this is the one for you.
And why is that important, Kimmy? Why does a hiring manager care that you're interested in this specific job? And why doesn't that manager want to hear that you're open to all opportunities? Sometimes people move to cities and they want to start a job. So why shouldn't they say I'll do anything?
Sure, it's definitely one thing to have that attitude and to be thinking to yourself, I'm open to a wide variety of positions. But a hiring manager might look at that and think, oh, what if they come and they want to move to a different department, or they don't want to advance in this position, and so we're going to end up needing to hire another person. So it's similar to the interview question, the common question that's, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Really what they want to hear is that you want to stay in this position and follow the track that presents itself with that particular position. Because if you end up wanting to do something else, then that's another person they need to hire, another person they need to train. It just presents yourself as someone who's going to stay in that position for a reasonable amount of time.
And that touches on another point that you recommend people who are relocating to a new place touch on, which is make sure that your job search goals align with an employer's needs. Say more about that. Why is that important for you as a candidate to consider an employer's needs, especially when you're relocating?
Really, the job search process is about what the employer needs. In the interview process, they don't feel not indebted to you, but they want to make sure the job search process is all about aligning your needs with a business's needs, because you can walk into any office and say, all right, I want a job making this much per year. What do you have? And that's not going to get you very far. You want to find a need within your particular industry or within your range of interests and present yourself as someone who can solve a problem that a business is having. That is one of my tips as well, is to look for what the industry is struggling with, what the company is struggling with, and present yourself as someone who can solve that problem.
Terrific. Let's pause and take a break. Stay with us. When we come back, Kimi Schiefer will continue to share her advice on how to look for work while moving to a new place. Have you ever picked a vacation spot based on where you don't need a phrase book? With Babbel, the language barrier no longer has to hold you back. Babbel teaches you the words and phrases for the things you actually talk about in the real world. I've seen the difference Babbel makes in my own life. I use Babbel to keep up the Spanish I learned in classrooms and in travel in Latin America and Spain. And I needed Babbel's help. Last year, I visited Barcelona for a job board conference, and I could tell my Spanish had slipped. Since that trip, using Babbel has helped me speak Spanish much better. And I'm not surprised. Babbel's lessons are voiced by native speakers and built with cognitive tools that fit any learning style. Babbel also uses interactive dialogues, and these have made a big difference in my Spanish. I want you to learn another language, so I'm teaming up with Babbel to gift you 55% off subscriptions, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/dreamjob. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/dreamjob, spelled BABBEL.com/dreamjob. Babbel.com/dreamjob. Rules and restrictions may apply. Nobody likes to get spam, and it's especially annoying when you do a job search. Whether you're looking for work or not, you've likely seen your share of emails and texts promising jobs that you know are too good to be true. If you live in the United States, one way the spammers find you is by using people search sites. These are websites that create detailed personal profiles and publish them online for anyone to see and buy. This can expose you not only to spammy job offers, but also to risks such as identity theft, online harassment, and even stalking. There are hundreds of people search sites. You could contact each one and ask to delete your data. Or you can use Incogni. Incogni reaches out to data brokers on your behalf, requests removal of your personal data, and deals with any objections. And because many data brokers continue to collect your personal information after they've removed it, Incogni takes care that your data stays off the market by making repeated removal requests. Take back control of your personal data today. Use promo code DREAMJOB to get an exclusive 60% off an annual plan at incogni.com/dreamjob. We're back in the Max List studio. I'm talking with Kimi Schiefer. She's a human resources generalist at the Bonneville Environmental Foundation. Previously, Kimi was a recruiter for an online publisher, a large retailer, and a national staffing agency. She joins us from Portland, Oregon. Now, Kimi, before the break, we were talking about how to look for work while moving to a new place. And in the first interview segment, you shared some of the concerns that recruiters like you have about candidates applying from out of state or across the country. And we started to talk about ways to address those concerns. I'd love to dig in on one of the recommendations you encourage candidates to follow, which is to explain to employers why you want to move to a new city. Why does this matter, Kimi, and what's the best way to do it?
It shows dedication. And like I mentioned, these recruiters and these hiring managers are people. They don't want to leave you in a bad position if they hire you and you move and it doesn't work out for some reason.
Are there typical reasons that you see, Kimi, as a hiring manager for why people relocate?
A lot of people move for their family's job or their spouse's job. Say their spouse accepts a role in a state that's further away. Now the other partner needs to find a job for themselves. So we see that a lot. We also see folks that are just tired of where they're living and would like a fresh start. That was my case when I was a job searcher. And so It really, another thing I would recommend is whether it's in your cover letter, which is a great resource for this, in your interview process if it comes up, because chances are the hiring manager is going to ask you why you're moving. So what I recommend is getting specific about why you want to move to that particular area. So if you're moving to Portland, you could say, I really love the food scene in Portland, or I like that this industry is available. And that will really show that dedication and intentionality that I talked about.
I'm curious, are there any reasons that are unpersuasive to employers that might turn them off that you've seen come across in cover letters or on resumes or in interviews?
Maybe the folks that, like we mentioned before, are just open to anything, open to going anywhere. So if you mention like, oh yeah, I just want to get out of here and go to maybe Denver or Seattle or this place, if you're not intentional about it, then it's a bit of a red flag, because it's like, okay, are you just applying to wherever, or are you actually interested in this particular position? It's intentionality. I know I keep harping on it, but that really is what it's all about.
So, Kimi, I know you're a big fan of candidates starting early in a job search when relocating to a new state or city. Why is it important to start early?
Overall, you're just going to be less stressed, and you need to limit your stress in the job search as much as you can. It's already a stressful enough process. Giving yourself enough time to really dig into what roles you want is super important. And desperation, there's a fine line between wanting a job and being desperate for a job. And it's something that employers can pick up on. And it raises the question of like, okay, why is this person desperate for a job? Is there something that we're not picking up on, or is there something that happened in their previous job? So if you start early, you're just going to have more time, which is great, because you never know how long the process is going to take. It could take a month, it could take 3 months, it could take 6 months. It's really unclear in the current market. So you really want to give yourself as much time as you can.
And what are some signs of desperation or anxiety you might see in application materials or in interviews among candidates who are relocating to a new city?
It's difficult to describe beyond their vibe and their overall attitude towards the whole process. There are certain things that can come up during interviews, such as like, oh, I really need this job. I really need to move to this place. It's like, okay, what is the reasoning behind that? Did something happen? It's like I said, it's difficult to describe, but I think that hire managers, of course, everyone is going to be nervous in an interview, but there's a line between being nervous and being, visibly anxious about something. And really, you just want to present yourself with confidence and with the expectation of, I can do this job and here's how.
Every job search is different, but in general, is there a timeline you would recommend someone consider especially when looking for work from in a new place? Should you allow 3 months, 6 months, even 12? What's been your experience as a recruiter when you've hired people who have come from out of state or outside the city where you're working?
I would give a minimum of 3 months. There's all kinds of different numbers being thrown around because, it depends on what role you're looking for, what level you're at. But I would definitely give a minimum of 3 months.
You mentioned cover letters and giving employers an explanation of why you're moving and what the reason might be for the change. How much information might you provide in a cover letter? Should you tell a story? Should you just share your plan? What have you seen be most effective?
I definitely wouldn't make your entire cover letter about why you're moving or that you are moving. I would put maybe 2 or 3 sentences at the very beginning, saying, my name is so-and-so, I'm a administrative assistant with this experience, and I'm looking forward to this job. I'll be moving to, say, Denver for this reason. I'm looking forward to this. And then you get into stories of work that you've done or ways that you align with the job description. So keeping it brief, because you don't want it to just be, I'm moving to this place and I need a job, but mentioning it for sure is the way to go.
What about looking for work in particular? You are interested in going to a new city or state. You can find job postings online, of course, but what else would you recommend a candidate do? Can it be effective, for example, to network virtually through Zoom calls, or should you consider making a short-term trip to the city you hope will be your new home? What are your thoughts there, Kimi?
LinkedIn. Use LinkedIn. It's such a standard now that you really can't afford to not be on LinkedIn if you're a job searcher. I would recommend starting to connect with people in your target city as soon as possible. Once you decide that you want to move, see if there's anyone, if you went to college, if there's an alumni association there, or if there's someone in your industry that you can talk to. It's really, people are very open to connecting. I think that folks can be a little hesitant because it can feel transactional. But just reaching out to someone and saying, hey, you're in an industry that I like. I'm planning to move to this city. Would you be open to talking to me about it, without the expectation that they're going to respond? So reaching out to as many people as you can, hopefully folks that you already have a link with. But honestly, shoot your shot. You can connect with someone that doesn't necessarily have a connection to you. And I've formed some really great relationships with folks before I even moved. So really reach out and connect, try to put a face to a name, and use the resources that you have, especially on LinkedIn.
And when you make that connection, what's the next step? Are you asking for an online conversation? And what might a successful meeting look like when it does happen?
I definitely recommend getting on Zoom or Google Meet, have a conversation first about, why you're moving, where you'd like to move, maybe neighborhoods. And then if they're responsive and you get, a positive impression of the conversation, then say, hey, I would love to talk to you more about this. Would you be open to a Zoom? Or I'm making a trip and would you like to meet up then? Getting in person is always great. Obviously, that's not always possible when you're moving cities, but following the natural flow of the conversation and then having questions prepared to do a sort of informational interview about the city and any opportunities that might be available.
Well, it's been a terrific conversation, Kimi. Now tell us what's next for you.
Yeah, so I'm with Bonneville Environmental Foundation. We're doing some really great work around solar accessibility, and I'm really excited to see what we're going to do now that we're working with the EPA and all of our other founders.
Well, terrific. I know that listeners can learn more about your work at the Bonneville Environmental Foundation by visiting your website, and that URL is www.b as in boy -e -f as in Frank.org. And that you also invite listeners to connect with you on LinkedIn. When you do reach out to Kimi on LinkedIn, I hope you'll mention that you heard her on Find Your Dream Job. Now, Kimi, given all the great advice you've shared today, what's the one thing you want a listener to remember about how to look for work while relocating?
Be intentional. You are applying to a specific job because you want that specific job. So be intentional about where you're moving, what you're moving for, and what the position offers.
Next week, our guest will be Heather Black. She's the founder and CEO of Supermoms. Her company helps you achieve a flexible, well-paid tech career after parenthood. One day, you're likely to take a career break. Perhaps you'll raise children, care for a family member, or deal with a health problem. And when you're ready to return to work, you may have new goals. And employers will have questions about your time away. Join us next Wednesday when Heather Black and I talk about how to relaunch yourself after a career break. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job. This show is produced by Max List. Susan Thornton Hoff schedules our guests and writes our newsletter. Lisa Kislenberry Anderson manages our social media. Our sound engineer and editor is Matt Fiorillo. Dawn Moll creates our transcripts, and our music is by Freddie Trujillo. This is Mac Pritchard. See you next week. Have you ever been asked this in a job interview? Tell me about a time when you didn't agree with your boss. What would you say? This is what's called a behavioral interview question, and it's a common tactic. Employers use this kind of question to explore your fit for a job based on your past experience. It can be an easy question to answer if you have the right strategy. I show you how to answer these gotcha questions in our free Max List guide, 100 Behavioral Interview Questions You Need to Know. To get your copy, visit maxlist.org/questions. You'll also learn 4 simple steps for answering any behavioral interview question. Again, that's maxlist.org/questions. You can count on getting these questions in your next interview. Why not get the answers before you walk into the interview room? Go to maxlist.org/questions.